Margaret's left hand is trying to choke her. She is sitting in a hospital bed, her right hand gripping her left wrist, pulling it away from her own throat. She is not in a struggle with another person. She is 71 years old, 4 days post-stroke, and she is fighting herself. The nursing staff found her this way at 2 a.m, not screaming, which is almost the most disturbing detail, just wrestling, quietly, with a look on her face that was less terror and more bewilderment, as though she were watching something happen to someone else and simply couldn't look away. Her left hand does not feel foreign to her. She knows it is hers. She can feel pressure when someone touches it. She can feel temperature. She just cannot stop it. It reaches. It grasps. It interferes. And when she uses her right hand to restrain it, she describes the experience as holding down a dog that doesn't understand why it's being punished. Not her words, her exact words. A dog that doesn't understand. Alien hand syndrome, sometimes called anarchic hand syndrome, or colloquially Dr. Strangelove syndrome, after the Stanley Kubrick film in which a character's arm performs fascist salutes against his will, is a real documented neurological condition. It is not a psychiatric disorder. It is not psychosomatic. It is not a metaphor. It is one of neuroscience's clearest demonstrations that voluntary movement and conscious intention are not the same thing. In alien hand syndrome, one limb, usually a hand, performs complex, seemingly purposeful actions that the person experiencing them did not intend and cannot control. These are not simple spasms or reflexes. The affected hand may button and unbutton clothing in sequence. It may reach for objects across a table with apparent purpose. It may interfere with tasks the other hand is trying to complete, a phenomenon researchers call intermanual conflict. In documented cases, the alien hand has been observed lighting cigarettes, tearing up papers the person was trying to read, slapping the patient's own face, and in rarer, more severe presentations, attempting to restrict the airway. The hand doesn't seem confused. It seems to have an agenda. The condition is rare. It appears in the literature in cases of corpus callosum damage, the thick band of nerve fibers connecting the brain's 2 hemispheres, as well as following strokes, brain tumors, neurodegenerative diseases like corticobasal syndrome, and surgical procedures in which the hemispheres are intentionally severed to control severe epilepsy. The exact mechanism varies by case, but the core phenomenon is consistent, a hand that acts without its owner's permission. Margaret's case followed an ischemic stroke that caused damage to her left frontal lobe and the anterior corpus callosum. It is one of the more common presentations. It is also one of the most disorienting. Before the stroke, Margaret had been a primary school teacher for 34 years. She taught 3rd grade in a mid-sized town in the Midwest, and by all accounts, she was one of those teachers children remember for the rest of their lives. The kind who noticed when someone came to school without breakfast. The kind who read aloud with genuine expression. She retired at 67, not because she had to, but because she wanted, as she put it, to have enough years left to do the reading she'd been putting off. She lived alone. Her husband had passed 6 years earlier, in the house where she'd raised 2 children. She walked every morning. She kept a garden. She was in the habit of writing letters by hand, to her daughter in Portland, and to a former student who had stayed in touch for 20 years. The handwriting in those letters, her daughter would later say, was always very deliberate, very controlled. It was something Margaret was particular about. She believed handwriting was a form of character, and she took some pride in hers. She was also, by her own description, a fundamentally practical woman. She did not frighten easily. She did not dramatize. When she fell slightly during a walk one Thursday morning and noticed a brief, strange numbness on her left side, she waited until the next day to call her doctor. She assumed she'd simply stepped wrong. She had not. The stroke was classified as mild to moderate. Margaret spent 3 days in hospital, received standard post-stroke evaluation and care, and was discharged with a referral to outpatient physical therapy and a list of medications. The left side weakness she had experienced was already improving. The medical team was cautiously optimistic. She returned home on a Friday. On Saturday morning, she was in her kitchen making toast when her left hand picked up the butter knife. She noticed this only because she had been reaching for it with her right hand and found it already in use. Her left hand was holding it. She had not instructed it to do so. She stood there for a moment watching. Then her left hand set the knife down. She later told her daughter that she initially assumed she'd simply moved on autopilot, that her left hand had moved before she'd consciously registered the thought. People do that. Muscle memory. She didn't think about it again until that evening, when she sat down to watch television and her left hand repeatedly changed the channel. She would set the remote down. Her left hand would retrieve it. She would place it out of reach. Her left hand would move toward it. She put her left hand under her thigh and sat on it. She said later that this was the first moment she felt something like alarm. Not because the hand had done something dangerous, but because she had instinctively treated it as an external problem, something to contain. It took 2 more weeks and one alarming incident in which her left hand attempted to remove a pot of boiling water from the stove while her right hand was already carrying it before her daughter insisted she return to her neurologist. It was there, finally, that someone gave the experience a name. The months that followed were, by any measure, a sustained exercise in humiliation and fear. Though Margaret would have objected to that framing, she preferred the word inconvenience. That was the word she used in conversations, and her composure seemed genuine rather than performed, which her neurologist found both admirable and clinically instructive. The alien hand, she never called it that, she called it the left, was most active during moments of distraction or emotional stress. When Margaret was absorbed in reading, it might quietly begin pulling at her clothing. When she was on the phone, it would rearrange objects on the table in front of her. When she was anxious, it became more forceful. On 3 separate occasions documented in her clinical record, her left hand grabbed her own throat during sleep or near-sleep states. Each time she woke herself in the process of restraining it with her right hand. She was not injured during any of these episodes, but her sleep became profoundly disrupted. She began tying her left wrist loosely to the bed frame at night, a solution she described to her doctor with characteristic matter-of-factness. She also began wearing oven mitts. This is not a detail inserted for effect. It is documented adaptation behavior seen in multiple alien hand cases. Covering the hand reduces its tactile feedback, and in some patients modestly reduces unsolicited activity. It also serves a psychological function. It marks the hand as other, as something to be managed. Her daughter flew in and stayed for 6 weeks. She watched her mother command her own hand aloud, not quite to herself, more like addressing a stranger in the room. She would say firmly, "Stop," or "Not now." The hand did not consistently obey, but the vocalization seemed to help in ways that remained neurologically interesting to her treatment team. What Margaret was experiencing is, at its neurological core, a breakdown in what researchers call motor intention, the mechanism by which the brain's left hemisphere, which governs language and deliberate action, normally maintains dominance over voluntary movement. In a healthy brain, the corpus callosum continuously transmits signals between hemispheres, ensuring that, when you decide to do something with your right hand, your left hemisphere's decision takes precedence, and the right hemisphere's competing motor impulses are suppressed. When the corpus callosum is damaged, as in Margaret's case through stroke, that suppression can fail. The result is a hand that acts on impulses generated by the right hemisphere, which has its own goals, its own learned behaviors, its own responses to environmental cues, but which normally operates in the background, subordinated to conscious intention. The alien hand, then, is not alien at all. It is you, or at least it is part of you, a part that has always existed but has always been kept quiet. The apparent purposefulness of the alien hand's movements is not mysterious. The right hemisphere has a full repertoire of learned motor programs. It knows how to button a shirt, how to pick up a knife, how to change a channel. What it lacks is the conscious intention that we typically experience as the self making a choice. This is why verbal commands sometimes help. Language is largely a left hemisphere function. When Margaret said "stop" aloud, she was, in a sense, reasserting left hemisphere authority, using the system that still worked to try to regulate the system that didn't. It was imperfect, but it was not irrational. And when she tied her wrist to the bed frame at night, she was solving a problem that her own nervous system had created, adapting, as she had spent a career teaching children to adapt to a situation she had not chosen. There is no cure for alien hand syndrome. There are management strategies, and their effectiveness varies considerably by patient and cause. For Margaret, a combination of approaches produced what her neurologist described in clinical notes as meaningful, functional improvement over 12 to 18 months. Botulinum toxin injections into specific muscles of the left hand reduced its range of unsolicited motion. Constraint-based therapies, originally developed for stroke rehabilitation, were adapted to help her brain gradually reassert more consistent control. The verbal command strategy she had stumbled upon herself was formalized and expanded into a broader behavioral protocol. The nocturnal episodes became less frequent, then rare. She discontinued tying her wrist to the bed. She kept one oven mitt in a kitchen drawer, but stopped wearing it daily. She resumed writing letters, though she noted in one of them that she now always wrote with her right hand deliberately placed over her left on the table. Not because it was necessary, she said, but because it made her feel more like herself. She never fully recovered what she called the trust. She remained aware of her left hand in a way most people never have to be. She watched it, not constantly and not anxiously, more the way you might glance at a window in a house where you once heard something inexplicable in the night. You know it's probably fine. You look anyway. Margaret's case, like all cases of alien hand syndrome, raises a question that most of us spend our entire lives not having to ask. Who is in charge? We assume, without examination, that we are the authors of our movements, that when a hand reaches, we have reached. That intention and action are unified, seamless, ours. Alien hand syndrome removes that assumption with surgical precision. The hand is still your hand. The brain generating its movements is still your brain. And yet something is acting that you did not choose. Neuroscience tells us this division has always been there. Two hemispheres, two streams of processing, one of which we call the self, and one of which we rarely notice at all. In most people, the structure holds. The quieter half stays quiet. Margaret simply learned what happens when it doesn't. If you like unsettling psychology, like and subscribe for a new diagnosis each week.